Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where today we're going to talk about prompters in worship.
Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where our mission is to equip and encourage worship leaders and teams in practical components of local church leadership. We're so thrilled to have you listening to our podcast, and our prayer is that it's helpful for you and your teams. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us at worshipleadertoolbox.com, and we'd also be honored to have you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to us. Heading now to today's episode with Tim Price.
Many of us have heard the theater analogy of worship services. Like God is the audience, the worship team helps direct, and it's really the congregation who are the performers for God, the audience.
This is one of those things that a lot of people say and a lot of people have. It's actually from Kierkegaard. I think I'm saying his name right.
Kierkegaard. That's a fun name.
Way back when. The modern worship experience is in some ways kind of consumeristic.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even like the phrase, oh, how was the worship today?
Yeah.
Because people are usually talking about the music when they're talking about that. And
yeah.
It just annoys me. Here's the modern day thing too often is that the congregation is the audience and they spend time judging the experience. And if they don't like it, they go somewhere else type mindset. Those involved in leading the worship team or, whoever, those people are the actors. And they're kind of like the ones who give the audience something. And then in this modern kind of thing, God is the prompter, telling the leaders what to include, what songs, what scriptures, what to say. And people are kind of waiting for God to move in their lives too. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's, that's not, those things aren't always an all bad way to look at things because we do want to be those people who help. But in this revolutionary kind of countercultural way, Kierkegaard gave this theater analogy where God is the audience and the only one that all of us together are worshiping. And then the congregation is really the performers. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who are giving God praise. And so it's the job of the worship team to be the actors or the prompters in worship. And they remind people and tell people, much like, teleprompters do, which some of us used and we all see presidents use them and stuff like that. I mean, we're the ones that help them know what to say and what to do and give them those cues so that the church is able to worship God. Yeah. That's the whole point of this idea of prompter. Yeah. And that's just been interesting to me. Yeah. Thinking about that.
No, that's awesome. I hope that this isn't like jumping the shark or putting the cart in front of the horse, but this first little thing that you're talking about here where it says God is the audience or like the only one worthy, kind of a thing is recently I have started, leading worship at a church. And a few weeks ago, there was a guy and he was leading a song. And like I've heard him sing before and he's a great singer, but for whatever reason, like he was just kind of in his own head, right? Like through rehearsal, like he came equipped and ready, but through rehearsal, I don't know what was going on in his life that day. But like I could tell something was up and he was just having a really hard time, like leading. And I don't really know what was going on, but afterwards, I was kind of talking to him like, hey man, I said, don't worry about, what's all going on out there. People are going to be there, but like all that you have to know is that you're singing to an audience of one. And it's so crazy because like, after I said that to him, first off, like he was like insanely grateful of like hearing that audience of one little blurb and that was just kind of like ingrained in his mind. But come Sunday, like I could tell that he was singing to an audience of one and that his focus had completely changed, Yeah,
that's good.
So I hope I didn't jump ahead anywhere.
There's like two things in there, and one of them is that that does help give focus to the worship team. Yeah. But then there's also this other side that the prompter side puts in it that says the congregation is definitely singing to audience of one. Yeah. They're not singing to the worship team or the pastor. They're singing to God alone. Yeah. The worship team is also singing to God alone and simultaneously helping the congregation sing. Yeah. And most often, if they're passionate, then that's going to just exude and everybody's going to be there. Yeah. But that's where every once in a while, which we could get into potentially, that sometimes people think, oh, I'm just worshiping God however I want, and they don't care about the congregation. Oh, yeah. Well, then you've got potentially problems if there's some quirk they're doing. I mean, like, if there's some weird thing that starts to break down or whatever. But the other thing you mentioned is this idea that that God's the only one worthy to judge our our worship and praise. And that's where, like the picture on the refrigerator is a image of that. Like if a little kid draws a picture, it looks like a watermelon, but it's actually the mom. And then they're like, oh yes, this is you. And then you put it on the fridge because it was done by your kid and they did it with loving hearts and good attitude. And so if somebody can't really sing and they can't really do anything and then they're still there and they're giving their all, or it doesn't look like they're giving their all, but we can't judge their heart, then God judges the worship. And so it can be on the spectrum. And so that's just really interesting.
That's so good.
Well, it is interesting to me to think about prompter and, the idea that the worship team helps the congregation know what to do or say next. That's a big deal. And it's not just, just the one lone guitar playing singer, worship leader guy. It's the whole band. It's any leaders who are involved. It's the orchestra or the, people playing music or the media team or the lighting team, all those people. And these days with all the online stuff that has emerged over the last year, all those people are helping, people at home worship and helping to enhance. And really the best prompting team is those who do it without anybody really noticing they're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge thing. So we have this little short list of 4 things that we're going to talk about. Thoughts on being prompters in worship.
We believe in the Worship Leader Toolbox and the work we're able to accomplish by the grace of God and with your partnership. There are 2 simple ways to support this podcast, and the first one is by clicking the support button and commit to sponsoring us on a monthly basis. And with any contribution of 99 cents or more, we will send you a free gift. The second way is through Amazon Smile. Just go to worshipleadertoolbox.com/Amazon to set the one-time link up that allows Harvest to receive a small percentage of your Amazon purchase. Well, let's just jump into these then. Prompters in worship. So number 1, show as much as you say. Model it.
Yeah, modeling it.
Yeah.
And that's the old adage that people will do what you do, not what you say.
Yeah.
And so if you want your congregation to be more alive in worship, which I also think is important, then your people on the team have to be alive. And this prompting idea helps me get a clearer way of expressing that. Because in the past, I've thought it was kind of weird for the worship leader to look over at the vocalist and say, hey, guys, lift your hands and be more charismatic or, be more whatever. And it's not that their hearts aren't there. It's just that, the freedom to say, oh, now we can do this, or yes, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Some people are just free as a bird type people, and they do it no matter what.
Yep.
Other people have to be invited to do that. If you are truly a prompting team, and you want people to be free to worship with their hearts and their lungs and their arms and feet and lives in general, then that's a good way to say it. That we're prompting, and we're not going to prompt the whole church and say, "All right, every single person lift your hands," and not if if everybody didn't, you stop the song type thing. That'd be ridiculous. Nobody would do that. But for the people who want the invitation to be more free and worship with their whole self, then the prompting team, the worship team, would offer that opening by showing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes saying it, but people are going to follow what they see more than what they say.
Yeah. And so an example I have is, sometimes as the worship leader, you have to prompt it for your team, who then learns, and then they're then prompting it. And my example is this past week we were leading worship, and it was interesting because I wasn't singing, I was just playing guitar or whatever. But because I wasn't singing, I didn't have a microphone or anything like that, but I was still singing on stage, right? On the platform and stage. I shouldn't have said that because it's like a theater.
Well, stage still works.
Yeah.
But it's weird. Some churches only call it a platform.
Yeah.
And some people only call it a stage. And then you get in traditional setting and it's only called a chancel area.
Yeah. Oh, chancel area. So I was on the chancel area playing an electric guitar.
You should never be on a chancel playing electric guitar.
So I was up front, and I was leading worship, but I wasn't singing, so I didn't have a microphone. But I was up there, and I was still singing while I was up there, and I was free. I was looking around, observing the team, and I noticed that some of the vocalists who did have mics, when they weren't singing on mic, their mic was just kind of down, and they weren't singing, which then I was kind of like, I went back and watched the replay from, the live feed. And man, it really kind of gave me this sense of like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be singing. Maybe it's just this one person who's supposed to be singing. So I have been encouraging them to like, hey, even whenever you're not singing a part on the mic, you can have the mic down and you can still be singing and worshiping, because it gives a better prompt for the whole congregation to sing.
Yeah, because you want the parts. Like, there are any times when you want one person to start a song, and that makes an impact instead of just, everybody put the mic up, go 90 miles an hour till the song's over.
Yeah.
But there's the idea that, unless it's a performance song that people are supposed to listen to reflect, then pretty much our goal is to invite everybody to sing, so we should all be singing whether we're on the mic or not.
Exactly.
But I even like it when I see like drummers singing and stuff.
Oh yeah. You guys have a drummer who sings, right?
Yeah. Over the years we've had like 3 or 4. Some of them have almost led from back there, but right now we have a couple of them that sing while they play or can. Don't always do it, but
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super good. So that's the first one. Show as much as you say it. So we have to model it. All right. So the next one we have here is that it gives a sense of our, air quotes, jobs as a worship team.
This is where I was saying, people that want to close their eyes. Like, I think I already used this as an example. Like they say, oh, that's just how I worship.
Yeah.
So they close their eyes the entire time. They would never know if the church was even still there.
From up front?
Yeah, from up front.
Oh, wow.
And so that's on you. If you want to get a big discussion going on one of the worship leader Facebook groups, say, should we keep our eyes closed the whole worship time, or should we not? Or how much should we close our eyes? Everybody has a thought about that.
Yeah.
But if you are part of the congregation, this group that's performing for God in worship, you could close your eyes the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
But as a worshiper on the team, as one of the prompters, I'm not sure if that's good. I mean, because then all of a sudden you've kind of laid aside this role that you have to help show the congregation when and what to say and how to do it. And that's just one tiny example. I mean, there's other examples too, but that's just one of those aspects that gives us a sense of, yes, we are worshiping, but we also have a job to do.
Yeah.
And let's help the congregation to worship.
Yeah.
I can't think of other examples though, off the top of my head.
I don't know. I have my own thoughts about the closing the eye thing. I have 2 thoughts and they overlap.
Okay.
And one is that like I do that. I totally do that. Like if I'm like really into the song, I just like, there's times where I just like kind of close my eyes and just worship. But then also the other part of my mind is like, hey, Clint, open your eyes. Like you need to see where the congregation is. And if if you can sense that like the Spirit's moving and everyone is worshiping, and you just, you need to see if like we need to do this course again because everyone's in, and then, so you prompt that, and then you might have to like, maybe you have a hand gesture for the team that knows that like, okay, he's prompting it and he has a hand gesture that like, we're going to break it down. We're going to get small. And it's, you could just lift up just voices and acoustic, for example, you know what I mean? So like, in that sense, everyone needs their eyes open, so I'm in 2 worlds. I'm torn.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like you put that out there and that's a big conversation. Like, what should you do? I think closing your eyes sometimes is good.
Yeah.
But I think every once in a while, there's that weird case where somebody just says, this is how I worship.
Yeah.
And they hold the mic, they shut their eyes, they sing 3 songs. And that is negating the job you have as a worship leader to help prompt the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if everybody shut their eyes, you wouldn't be prompting anybody anyway.
Yeah.
The whole I'm just kidding. That's just like one. That's the only example I can think of. But we do have a job as a worship team.
Yeah.
Our job is to worship God and to help the congregation worship. And so we are on a slightly different level than just being out in the congregation. Yeah. And that's where when worship team members say, yeah, it's great to be out in the congregation, didn't have to, think. So, I was able to worship differently. Yeah. It is true you can worship on stage, but you also have a job to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you're like locked in a little more.
Yeah. You said something very interesting, and I'm just going to interject real quick, which is a side tangent and a completely different podcast that we talked about before. But in my own life and experience, the only time I can't worship from up front is if I'm not prepared. So like, if a person ever says that, that the only time they can worship is when they're in the audience, in my mind, I and I don't know if this is like, terrible to think or whatever, but I automatically wonder like how much preparation they're putting into practicing before rehearsal, before Sunday.
Well, that would be a good podcast because there are a lot of dynamics. Like when you're on stage in our setting, you have 2 services, and you probably drove to church on your own, and so the idea of getting in the car with your family and driving to worship and sitting in a row of chairs together and being with your spouse and kids or whatever, that you sacrifice that part whenever you're on stage leading worship. And you kind of, you have to hear the sermon twice. You walk to the back. Everybody's kind of chit-chatting during one of the services. It's just a different feel.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there are a lot of things to what you were saying. But a lot of times I feel most worshipful when I'm on stage.
Yeah.
Probably prepared is a good way to put it, though. On the most prepared times, I really get a sense. On non-prepared times, I'm thinking of stuff that I should have done or said or told somebody, or, oh, why didn't that light go down? Or, oh, gosh, the video didn't start. Based on who I am and how the Lord's wired me up, I have those same thoughts if I'm sitting out in the congregation, too. And, I'd be running around then, too. I'd be like, unless maybe I'm a guest at a church. But if I'm at our own church, I kind of shoulder the burden in some fashion or another of, being around. I loved what one guy said once. He said he is most comfortable in the front or in the back.
Oh, wow.
It's hard for him to sit in the middle. So he's either on the stage or he's in the tech, but when he's in the congregation, it's tough. And that's interesting based on our conversation here of the congregation being the performers.
Yeah.
So maybe that says something about the heart. I don't know.
Man, we can go
about that.
Man, we can go to a podcast about heart and worship leaders.
But our little card here might be almost ready to go out, so we'll have to speed this podcast along.
Okay. So the next one, just like the card and the recorder and the mics and the cables, it all works together.
Yeah, and thinking about prompting, this is, just one example is the lights. Lights can prompt people, and it's interesting. Like when the lights dim, everybody finds their seat, gets quiet, sits down. Or whenever when the music starts, everybody stands up. And music, all those can be a prompter, and help people do it. Like prompting in a baseball game. Yeah. If you hear the organ play Star Spangled Banner, everybody stands up. Yeah. And it's just weird. Prompting of happy birthday, singing happy birthday. Yeah. Everybody, if that song starts, everybody joins in.
Everybody. And
so if you can have those kind of thoughts about how you're going to get people to do this or that, sing praise or to stand or sit or, worship or whatever. Yeah. All that fits in.
That's good. All right. And our last one here, it says, great prompting requires knowing where you're going and how you want to lead people.
I think we hammer this a lot because it's like my weak link in life. Because for the most part, I know the general sense, but I really lead from a sense of oh, here we are. We got a few songs. Let's look at everybody in the eyeballs and see where they want to go. And I've just never been the type of person that scripts out what I'm going to say in between or anything like that. And I know that's needed in a lot of different, fashions in our church, that the whole sermon scripted out. Our pastor Andy does that. And there's a lot of stuff that's really locked in, but I'm kind of convicted at times because really good prompting is knowing that you want the congregation to do a certain thing and that you want them to experience a certain sense or, even just setting up the flow of worship, just knowing where you're trying to get to at the end of that time block or that season.
Well, this was probably a quick conversation about prompters and worship, but I want to thank everyone for listening to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, and I want to prompt you to head on over and, if you would, leave us a 5-star review and a rating wherever you're listening to this from, and it just helps us out a lot. It helps us climb the ladder of all the other ministry-related podcasts out there in the large swimming pool of podcast land. So until next